And the House of Representatives Minority Caucus Ad hoc Committee says the Nigerian Tax Administration Act 2025 was illegally altered after lawmakers passed it, raising concerns over executive interference in legislation. In an interim report released in Abuja on Friday, the committee disclosed clear discrepancies between the National Assembly's certified version of the law and the version published in the official gazette. According to the panel, the version approved by the lawmakers sets tax compliance reporting threshold at 50 million naira for individuals and 100 million for companies. However, the gazetted law lowered the threshold for individuals to 25 million naira and altered the corporate threshold to 100 million naira from the 250 million naira earlier approved. The committee described the charges as a deliberate attempt to expand the tax net without legislative approval, calling it an abuse of executive power and a direct violation of the Constitution. And meanwhile, experts have raised concerns over the intentions of the federal government regarding the newly enacted tax laws. These concerns were expressed at the first quarter policy roundtable organized by the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought in the federal capital. Speakers at the event questioned whether the new tax regime genuinely seeks to promote development or merely increase government revenue at the expense of already overburdened citizens. Joining us now from Abuja is Dr. Sam Amadi, Executive Director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Good afternoon, Dr. Amadi. Thank you for joining us. Of course, we talked about, communication last week on Breakfast Extra. Can you tell us your position about the true intent of, the government and how it could, how could such significant changes appear in a law without lawmakers' approval, as we found in the House of Committee findings?
Well, thank you for having me. Again, I think the key point here is that for whether deliberately or otherwise, this government has had several instances of falsifications, wrong entries and removal. I mean, just last night or so, we had an ambassadorial list and somebody was put in there and later brought out not confirmed by the Senate. So it's probably a series of error or deliberate, alterations and falsifications. Again, that is fundamental, and that's part of what Abuja School brought at the discussion. There are two issues here: fiscal tax and all fiscal policy, public finance policies, are rooted in legitimate governance, and over time, there is a basis of the social contract between citizens and state. And it translates into constitutional documents that specify who has the right to levy tax policies, how is it done, who collects, and so on and so forth. So the Nigerian constitutional framework is very simple. No tax without representation, without law. And the law is made by the National Assembly through two houses, chambers, passing the same version and the signing. So there should be no basis for whatever, for having a version apparently signed by the president and gazetted variant from the version passed by the House. That's illegal, unconstitutional. And that suggests that maybe some persons at either the executive branch or legislature are responsible for falsifying. And if you look at the provisions that are altered, there are provisions that grant more power to these bureaucrats to either tax people, manage the instance of taxation, punish, sanction people, exceed their power that the parliament, legislature has given them. So that's both criminal and a constitutional violation of the point of a civilian coup. Basically, you are taking the power from the legislature, giving to yourself to aggrandize yourself, to make yourself more powerful than the law authorizes. So I think that is something that should be picked up and more inquired as to who did it. Obviously, it has to be somebody who is close enough to either the parliament or the executive branch to do it. This is not error that happens, it's not a clerical error. like E is missing, T missing. This is substantive alteration that some people have incentive to gain more power than authorized by the parliament must have done. And that squarely is in the tax committee, special committee on tax, should be probed and asked, and whoever worked with the Minister of Justice who did the gazetting, that should be where the inquiry should start from. So thoroughly, depressing, shows bad faith on the part of government, and should actually lead to truncation of the tax policy and start from afresh. Because why would the government really want to collect tax illegally from citizens?
Right. You had mentioned the executive branch, so I just wanted to ask who within the executive branch has the authority to alter a bill after, the passage is there? And of course, what do you think the National Assembly should do with all these errors?
Nobody in the executive branch has the right. Even the president. What the president has is the right of veto. The president can refuse to sign law, if not, agreeable to him, and then perhaps urge the National Assembly to alter the law. If they don't, they override him. So nobody in the executive branch has the power to alter. The only constitutional alteration is the one given to the president to make two laws already existing, to make them align. And that was during the military rule. So some of the decrees had to be aligned to the constitution. So that's the only instance about power to alter, and that's very specific, not laws to be signed by the president. So nobody. Again, what should be done? It's clear now that a crime, there's a potential crime committed, but for forgery is a crime, whether forgery of government document or forgery of law. Beyond forgery, there is perhaps now, in a sense, a constitutional violation that is impeachable. So if it's not the president who did it, which likely he didn't perhaps do it himself or authorize it, then public officials were involved. And again, look, we'll start with what did the clerk send to the president for signature? That version is what the president will sign. What do we give to the clerk? So we see that is there a difference between what was passed and what the clerk transmitted? If what the clerk transmitted is variant to what was passed, then the clerk is responsible. If the clerk transmitted the exact thing that was passed, then the chief of staff of the president and those who work within the president's suit, the presidential suit, are those who are responsible, because they're the ones. So if we discover that the president signed exactly what was transmitted to him, then it's no longer the fault of the presidential team directly. The question then is, who gazetted? After that, who took it to gazette? Then you'll be able to know exactly whether it was after the president signed the right bill passed, then somebody altered it in the process of gazetting, and then we localize it with the Ministry of Justice, who does gazetting, together with whoever gave it to them. So it's easy to find out who did what by exactly comparing what the National Assembly has passed, what the clerk transmitted, what the president signed, and what actually got gazetted. So, but the National Assembly, under this current leadership, will have no incentive to find the truth. I mean, they will be, if not because the minority caucus has been very active, every plan was to bury this and say, take out everything, remove this other evidence. I mean, this has been massive connivance and attempt to cover up this very serious constitutional violation.
Right. Well, we see that this tax situation is something that has made a lot of Nigerians come out to talk and question, because of course it's now affecting, their accounts and all whatnot and what they earn. And, some people are complaining the stamp duties and all, how, money has been taken from their account. But from your perspective, what impact would this threshold, either lowered or not, have on small businesses and individual taxpayers?
The problem with the tax is lack of clarity. And also, ironically, the prospect of multiple taxation. I mean, you go to eat in a restaurant here in Abuja, and if you look at your invoice or your receipt, you see VAT, 7%. Of course, you see another percent, just 7 or so called consumption tax. So it's not even clear, what regime of taxes that we are going to be subjected to. And this flies in the face of the first logic of this tax reform, to reduce the taxes we're exposed to streamline them, and so that there will be clarity and certainty about what people pay. We've not seen that. The second point is that if you look at the the whole logic. The idea seems to be to tax the rich and the middle class, take more money from them. But interestingly, these are the people who are also the productive class that finance small and medium enterprises, that also provide a lot of support for cash transfers, actually, to mitigate the spiral of poverty. So what the outcomes might be is that we're going to, inevitably or unintentionally, constrain capacity for investment in the small and medium enterprises. Because oftentimes the middle class and the lower rich class are those who from their savings finance these medium enterprises, small enterprises, in order to generate more income for themselves. So the logic of tax them more, target them, might carve out financing for those investments. So we're going to see more poverty because the poverty rate is growing, and the middle class what's left of the middle class now that supports the poor class no longer provide the support, but they too are facing more taxation and kind of government. And again, the problem is that when government takes money from the people, more money, the assumption is that the government is using that money to provide public good and maybe generate more opportunity for wealth creation, so that those people who the government is taking from are getting more. But here we have government that wastes money, government that spends on itself on politics and not on productivity. There is a double one. You are taking money from the people, depleting their income and their livelihood, but again, giving to government that wastes that money. So you are burning the candle at both ends. And in that context, the logic of taxation as a way of raising money to finance economic development might be faulty here. So I feel like we're going to burn our candle at both ends. We waste the money, we take from the people, they can't finance investment, they can't support those who are poor, transfer to government. So it's like transfer people to government, and then government themselves waste their money. And then the end of the later state of the economy is worse. No investment in productive assets, no generation of wealth at a scale that trickle down, and then no trickle down from the informal sector to the poor. So that would be, a big calamity. And I guess the guys who are doing this, the consultants who are shaping up this policy, have a broader perspective on the likely consequence of the new tax policy.
Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having to have conversations with you. And of course, Nigerians are seeing that we need to ask, these leaders to be accountable as to what, they dish out to us every day. So we appreciate you joining us and having this conversation. Thank you so much.